Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Women of Golf Show. I'm Ted Odorico, and joining me is LPGA professional Cindy Miller, and we are your hosts. We're broadcasting live every Tuesday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern here on the blogtalkradio.com network, bringing you some of the best golfers, teacher professionals, and entrepreneurs helping to elevate women's golf. We're so glad you decided to join us this morning, so grab your coffee and let's get started. All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Women of Golf. I'm Ted Odorico, and right alongside each and every week is none other than Legends Tour player and LPGA professional Cindy Miller, and we are your hosts here on the Women of Golf. Good morning, Cindy.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm doing even better now. How's that? Beautiful sunny day here where I am.
It's a beautiful day. Me too.
I know. We just need that sunshine, I think, to get the day starting. And it's just been a beautiful morning so far. It's been a little hot and muggy here where I am in the south for the last few days, but I'm not going to complain. And just good overall, so I can't complain. All right, we're excited to be here. We've got a couple of great things coming up this morning. First and foremost, of course, we're going to be starting off with another episode, if you will, of the No BS Zone. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. And a little bit later on, we're going to be joined by our very special guest, Gina Umeck. She is an LPGA member as well as the head women's golf coach for California State University in Northridge, and she'll be joining us a little bit later on in the show. So we're very, very excited to have her join us. But just a quick reminder that Women of Golf is brought to you by iGolfSports.com and Golf Tips Magazine. iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing top quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, offering insightful reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top PGA and LPGA teacher professionals, all designed to help improve your game from tee to green. So subscribe today at golftipsmag.com. All right, Cindy, there's a lot of, confusion, not so much within the industry, but outside, is what's the difference or some of the differences between a golf teacher versus a golf coach? We're going to talk about some of the differences and some of the similarities. And then when Gina comes on, because she is a golf coach, some of the points we're going to cover here today, and hopefully we'll get through most of them, or if not all of them, we'll ask her maybe a few questions there and get her perspective as well. I thought it would be a good opportunity to have this conversation since we're having a golf coach on the show. So are there similarities between a teacher and a coach? There certainly are, and here's a few. Just sort of the definition, if you will. Teaching, a teacher obviously teaches, but so does a coach. A golf coach has to know how to be able to fix swing problems and impart technical instruction. Like a teacher, a coach has to know the rules and etiquette of the game and be able to teach them to their players. So when you think of teaching, do you consider yourself a teacher? Do you consider yourself, or maybe a little of both? What's your perspective? Excuse me.
A little both.
So when do you consider yourself a teacher? Give us maybe an example of when you feel that you're kind of in your teaching mode and when you're in coaching mode, so that people understand the difference.
If someone comes in for a half-hour lesson or they want to change their game and they want to break 100 or 90 or 80 or 70, you evaluate the swing to see what challenges or issues they might have that are preventing them from reaching their goal. So when you teach them something, it's making a change in their swing, their thoughts, their pre-shot routine, their course management skills, their decision-making. And once they know how to do that, your role would switch to coaching, which might be more playing lessons, utilization of the skills you just taught them. if you will. So coaching is helping them along. Teaching them is giving them new information, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. You're really actually teaching in both in a lot of respects. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, teaching you're covering specific areas that maybe they're struggling with, and you're trying to provide them with solutions. Coaching is you're taking that information and you're helping them with their game sort of improve as they go along, and you're doing it over, typically a longer period of time. Teaching could be something as quick as a quick lesson, like you said, a 30-minute lesson, maybe even a couple of lessons. Coaching is when you're actually putting together a specific program to help them get the best out of their game, and again, typically over a long period of time. For instance, we see a lot of our tour players over the years will have a coach. They don't have a teaching professional. They may have started with a teaching professional, but typically they lock and load with a coach because they want them to basically cover all aspects of the game and be able to help them along and pinpoint areas that they may be struggling with still, but they're not actually teaching them necessarily new things. They're just enhancing the talents that they already have and helping to bring them to the surface. So great point, Cindy. I think that's well said. Another area I think that both certainly do have, and that is motivating. Certainly teachers want to motivate their new students, particularly to encourage them to be able to get out there and do their best. And as I mentioned, coaches do that as well. They're trying to find the best and pull that out of their students that they're working with. Particularly if they're a tour player or not, they want to continually motivate because, as you know, Cindy, when you're out on tour, you can get down sometimes, right? When you're not playing your best, you get into a kind of a funk, and it's not always easy sometimes to bring yourself out. So you've worked, I know, with players of different levels as well, and you've had to motivate them, right?
You do. I have a little bit of an issue here. So again, I think you might encourage. I don't know that you can physically motivate them to do something they don't want to do, but yes, uplift, fire them up, inspire, change the thoughts, but, come on. No, I'm not going to, can't push a wet noodle, but sometimes you have to give them tough love. And you know what's funny?
Yeah.
We had a young girl who went to play in her first HJGA or HJGT tournament, Hurricane Junior Tour. And I said, I need you to go do this and know that you're going to be scared to death and you're probably going to shoot a million and be totally embarrassed and nobody needs to know you were there except me and your parents. She did. She played terrible. She shot 90-86. And she came back and she said, oh, my God, I was nervous. And the last 9 holes were finally better. And so we did a playing lesson last Friday, and Alan was questioning her and said, okay, so why does the ball do this and why does the ball do that? And she kind of didn't answer and didn't know. And he said, for you to be able to adapt and change while you're out there, you need to, not overreact to the shot you just hit. You need to get your mind about you and say, okay, what just happened? What did I do there? And so he said, that's what makes a good player. No one hits it good all the time.
Right.
And I'll be darned if she didn't go out yesterday and shoot one over par and shot 74 and won a tournament. I mean, what a difference. 90-86 and then 74. I'm like, well, hi, how are you? So, so if that's motivation, so if that's motivation, then yes, we do. I think it's helping them get over the emotional trauma, maybe. I'm trying so hard and I'm not getting what I want. And go ahead.
Right. Well, here's another example. Yeah, here's another example. So there are times when a golfer, whether or not they compete, that they don't want to give the effort necessary to improve. And this is sometimes where, and again, you can word it as encouragement, and motivating is sort of an all-encompassing word, I guess. But that's a good example that you just gave, that sometimes, they're out there, they're just not, all cylinders aren't firing, and sometimes they just need those words of encouragement, and they just need, it just have to be, it has to be tough love sometimes. It doesn't have to be all, sunshine and roses and that. Sometimes it has to be that tough love, and sometimes you have to get right in there and say, hey, what's going on here? You were out last week and you're just not, it just doesn't look like you're pulling things together. And I know you can do it, and I know you've got the skills. We've worked on a number of different issues, and then you've all of a sudden you come out and it's just like, who the heck is this? And sometimes it just takes that little spark, and then the next thing you know, as you said, they're shooting one over par. So sometimes motivation, I think, can take on different forms, but in a sense, that's really what you're doing, I think, in a lot of ways. Another area that sort of falls into suit in that, Cindy, is a positive attitude. One of the longstanding credos for teachers is always to carry a positive attitude when teaching, which, going to your point, I know is not always easy. Sometimes it's frustrating as a teacher, and also it applies to coaches as well. And we've seen that sometimes, not so much from the coaches, but we've seen that from the support system, parents. We've talked about this, where parents actually create a negative environment. You've experienced that many times over the years when you're working with a student or whatnot, and the parents on the sideline, and they're what are you doing, and come on, smarten up and whatnot, and you're sitting there thinking, well, this is not helping, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's managing expectations. Yes, you have to be positive, but I think there's so much pressure put on kids to perform that they really aren't even having fun doing it. And so I think you have to have a positive attitude, but you also have to have realistic expectations. So yes. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So those are just some of the similarities. So let's look at some of the differences. And, some of the differences are, for an example, competition. This, of course, is probably the biggest difference. Coaches prepare players, as you mentioned, for team or individual competition, while teachers, again, are mainly involved in teaching and refining technique. So, again, as you mentioned, Cindy, and I'll let you, clarify anything. You've got students that come into you and say, hey, I'm struggling with this area, or this is happening, or I don't feel good about this. And you're then assessing that particular issue or other issues that may be related, and not really offering a fix, but offering an alternate solution to be able to overcome some of those difficulties. Whereas a coach is actually preparing them, getting them ready for tournament play or some other individual competition. So talk about that a little bit. You've had a number of different students over the years that you've worked with, young and old, where, they come in for the Band-Aid fix. And then you've had others that may still struggle in areas, but understand the general basics of what you're trying to express to them, and now it's just a matter of nurturing them along in order to be able to be competitive. Talk a little bit about both.
Well, a Band-Aid fix would be a lesson. So that would be a teaching situation, I believe. A coach, a long-term process coach with a player development program would be there for all aspects of the game. So I believe that you would change from, intertwine your skills from teaching to coaching. Like, okay, now we're getting ready to play. There's a difference. Now we have to learn to use the skills we've learned to be able to go play a round of golf. So that, in my opinion, is what's so different. I do a lot of quick fix-its. In fact, I call myself the 30-minute quick fix-it queen. But if you wanted long-term process and change, then you're going to have teaching and coaching. Don't you agree?
Right. And you're exactly right. Sometimes you can have a combination of both. I mean, there's situations where you've got to get in there. Sometimes, for instance, you might get a player out on tour who is really struggling with an area, and you can't necessarily coach that along. Sometimes there's specific things they're doing wrong, and maybe they've got the old chicken wing suddenly happening, or they've got something else, which I know doesn't happen that often, but they will fall into a pattern, and it's really up to a coach to be able to identify some of the issues. That's why quite often you will see, particularly many of the top coaches that will follow their students. They don't necessarily always travel with them, but they're at a fingertip phone call or Zoom call now, I guess, in many cases. And they're watching their students, and they'll see when they're having difficulties in a tournament. They're there to give them feedback, and they'll certain things they can with a couple of words can correct. And then other times it becomes a teachable moment. They're saying, look, I've noticed you're doing a lot of this, and you're coming over the top again, or you're doing this. And remember what we talked about. So you're referencing certain drills and certain techniques that we've talked about earlier on in your career that are creeping back in for some reason. So that could be an issue. It could be pressure. It could be all kinds of things. As well as yourself, and you get out there in the heat of the moment, and sometimes if the pressure mounts too much, suddenly bad habits start to creep in, and it's not always easy. And it sometimes takes that trained eye to do that. So a coach has to be prepared, I think, to flick the hat, turn the hat around, if you will, and become a teaching professional more in certain situations. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. So, again, It would be interesting to do, a survey, if you will, to some of the teachers or coaches, whatever you want to call them, out on tour. Like Mark Blackburn teaches a lot of tour players, and
right.
David Ledbetter. So are you a coach or are you a teacher? Because David Ledbetter is a swing coach, right? But is he?
Right. Yeah.
Is he helping them with their swing, or is he helping them with their mental game? And most of these people on tour have, someone for short game, and someone for their head, and someone for their nutrition, and someone for their fitness, and someone for their swing, and someone for their putting. And so it's like, and that's why they call my team. So I guess if you, it's funny because we took some pictures last night, and the young man is a good player, and he's a photographer, and he said, so what do you guys do? And my husband and I, both played on tour, for those of the listeners who don't know, and Alan's the second purest ball striker Dave Pels has ever tested. So Alan is a golf swing technician. So I say to people, he's smarter than me, I'm more fun, he thinks really deeply, he's a deep thinker, and I'm more of the head game.
Right.
The motivator, the inspirer, if you will. So it's funny because, are we both mental coaches? Yes. Do we both do swing coaching? Yes. Do we do putting? Yes. We do all of it. But what's the expertise? Probably him golf swing and me head game and producing.
Yeah.
If you will.
Well,
so
yeah, Alan, I would say from my perspective, just from, having him on the show a number of times, is he's more of a technical person. He looks at the swing from a technical aspect, where you're looking at it from more emotional and from a mind or mental approach. And how do you handle, your mind with difficult situations? How do you overcome some of the mental challenges and personalities? So it's a good balance, and it works well and can be very, very effective, because it's very difficult. I don't care whether you're considered to be the number one coach, in golf or what have you. It's very difficult to be good at all aspects. You can have general knowledge, but you tend to specialize in one area, I think. And I think this is one of the problems that we see, unfortunately, sometimes in golf instruction, is people try to be everything and all to everybody, and you just can't do that. You have to find what your niche is, and you found yours, and Alan has found his, and together you create a much more complete package. That's why you work very well together when you're doing your boot camps and other training opportunities, is you're able to draw from each other's specific talents and pool those resources together to give your students an overall well-rounded perspective of the game. Because if it's just one or the other, that's good, but sometimes you need both or more to be able to accomplish that. So that's something to really, for people out there, especially in our industry, to think about, because you can't try to be, as I said, everything to everybody. You've got to sort of find your niche in the game, and whether it's the short game or whether it's a specific area of the game, I think that's better. We won't get a lot into this one here because there's all kinds of things, but this is technology, and I think when it comes to that, a coach generally needs to make wider use of technology than necessarily a teacher. For example, TrackMan and FlightScope are launch monitors used by many club fitters, but also competitive golfers seek out these devices so they can truly know exactly what they're doing in terms of ball flight and club action throughout impact. So, as an example, many coaches rely very heavily on some of this technology with their students so they can see that, are the numbers changing? Are they consistent? Are they improving to the level that they want them to improve? Teachers, sometimes will use the technology, but again, because you're maybe dealing with a shorter time frame with some of the students in this case, that you're not really coaching them, you're just ascertaining certain issues, you might use this technology, but you're using it predominantly in a different way. So I know that you use some technology as well. Do you kind of see it that way, or am I, maybe not accurate in my analogy? But don't you agree? I think that as a teacher, you certainly may rely on some technology to give you pinpoint information that you can use to help do that. Whereas teaching, or rather coaching, it's a more longer and progressive relationship with technology. What do you think?
I think you would use technology to get a point across. You would videotape someone and show them what they're doing, what you want them to do, so they can understand it. And but I think you would also use it like blast motion. I've got a young girl who's been decelling. I said, "Hey, have you been practicing with your blast?" "Oh no, I forgot." I'm like, "Well, let's get this puppy out and start working with it." So I believe that, it depends on the coach and the teacher what they like to use, but I would use video, FlightScope, blast motion, and the coaching aspect of it would be ongoing, like, "Oh yeah, I forgot. I need to go pull that tool out and start using it." So. Right.
Yeah, and there's other things. Quite often teachers will use different training aids, in their approach, which is again not really technology in the sense of plugging it in or turning the batteries or what have you on. But so there's a lot of differences. There can be really some crossover, I think, between the two, for sure. But I think, again, as you pointed out in the beginning, I think with teaching students, you're not really so much it's a Band-Aid fix, but it's a quicker approach to the analysis, if you will, and it's not necessarily a long-going relationship, the same, again, depending on the circumstances, as it typically would be with the coaching. Coaching tends to be longer relationships. Most people are coming to teacher professionals because they're struggling with their game, and once they overcome some of the challenges, they more often not will then sort of not necessarily stop altogether, but maybe it's just an occasional tune-up as needed, or maybe at the beginning of a season they'll come with their, get together with their teaching pro and say, "Hey, I need, a few lessons to tune up for the season," and then they kind of drift off a little bit and do their own thing. Whereas coaching, again, if they're wanting to be highly competitive, then they tend to want to have somebody around, not necessarily at their beck and call, but more available, if you will, when certain situations arise that they need help with. And coaches also need to understand the mental side of the game a little bit better. And this sort of falls into the last one as well, is playing experience. A coach needs to have been in competitive arena himself or herself in order to be an effective coach. There are certain things that only competitive player would know, such as how pressure affects the swing, how to fix a swing or create a go-to shot when things go wrong. So, and also maybe how to manage emotional aspects of competing. So there's a lot of different things where a coach now steps in when you're dealing in competition, but a more effective coach, and that's not saying it's impossible, But if you're not a competitive or have not been a competitive player yourself, it's very difficult to be able to understand what your player is going through. Would you agree with that? And maybe you can touch on some points.
Well, Lynn Marriott never played on tour of PN Lynn, Vision 54. So, and David Ledbetter was not a great player, and neither was Mark Blackburn. And, you know, I can go over and over and over with a bunch of people that really never played very well, but are considered great coaches. So I don't know that I agree with that. I believe personally that you should have been, you know, I want to look to someone who was better than me, who did what I want to do. So I would prefer to be with someone who's been where I want to go and has experienced it. But I don't believe that everyone that's considered a great coach has been a great player.
Right. And, you know, the thing is that what we want to really get across here is that's not to say that a teacher who has not played competitive would necessarily make, you know, an ineffective coach. But it certainly helps, as you suggest. Obviously, there are certainly advantages. I think if somebody, you know, like our guest this morning, Gina, who played some competitive golf on the Symetra Tour, and so she understands the various pressures that you know, one would find, and so is a bit, I think, better able to articulate to you know, the players on her team maybe a little better than somebody who hasn't played competitive golf. Now, that's not to say, as you know, we're suggesting that you can't do it, but it certainly makes, I think, life a little bit easier to understand. It's kind of like, you know, if you are somebody who has never, you know, been a race car driver, but you drive kind of fast on the highway, that doesn't mean that you're going to be a good race car driver. Because you don't necessarily have the experience. You might be a little heavy lead-footed on the freeway, but that doesn't mean that, you know, if you were driving a Formula One car that you're going to be going around. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying is you might have some experience driving relatively fast, but there are things when you're actually in that competitive things that you need to know, because there are other people obviously that can affect that. So I know it's not the greatest analogy, but that's the best I could come up with on short notice. So, but great conversation, Cindy. I think, you know, I think we covered a lot of things. There are certainly some differences and obviously some similarities between a teacher professional and a coach. And just, I think, things for people to think of. I think when you're, you know, as a student, if you're looking for certain things particular, I think you need to have a general understanding of what some of the differences are when you're seeking a professional to work with. If you're just wanting to, you know, deal with specific things of your game, then, you know, looking for a good qualified teacher professional is maybe what you need. If you're maybe a youngster who's considering a college, you know, career or competitive career, and hopefully, you know, progressing into the next level, then obviously you're going to be wanting to seek out a coach who can help nurture that relationship along. So good conversation, and thank you as always, Cindy, for a lot of great input. We're going to move on to our special guest, Gina Umeck. She is a LPGA member and college golf coach at California State University, Northbridge in Los Angeles. The Redlands, California native, played collegiate golf at UCLA, where her Bruin team won the Pac-10 regional and national championship in 2004, along with one other conference and regional title in her 4 years with the Bruins. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in Spanish from UCLA in 2005 and also has a minor in Korean language. Post-college, she went on to play professionally, as I mentioned, for a number of years, 5 years, in fact, with the LPGA Symetra Tour, and played in the 2008 U.S. Women's Open. She then was an instructor at Wilshire Country Club and Aroma Golf Academy, both in Los Angeles, where she offered instruction in Korean and English to junior amateur players and their members. Cindy, let's welcome our very special guest this morning, Gina Umeck.
Good morning.
Hi, Cindy. Ted, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Gina. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks
you
very
for having
much.
me.
Cindy,
Can
go
you
ahead.
guys hear me okay?
Perfect. Very well. Cindy, go ahead.
Great.
So Gina, tell us the difference between teaching and coaching. And since you're a college coach, how do you flip back and forth and wear all the hats you need to wear?
Yeah, sure. I was listening in about 5 minutes ago, and it's interesting, the experience factor. We've all seen, I think, great instructors who may have not, ascended to a really high playing level. And I think where I stand on it is, if you have that experience, if you have played, you've got a little bit extra buy-in initially, I think, with a student. You have that buy-in where, what you're saying kind of inherently has the value. I think if you don't have that experience, it doesn't mean you can't be a great coach at all. I think you just have a little bit more proving of yourself to do, so to say. I've seen great instructors who haven't played at high levels. Fantastic, better than me. And I think that's kind of where I land on the issue. I think you can be great, but you just you got to have a track record that's established in, producing and cultivating players of your own, that, kind of proves itself. So, and it's also interesting being a college coach. I do have to wear a lot of hats. I have to make that choice as to whether or not I jump in if I see something going on with a player's swing, or if I just let them kind of iron it out on their own. I certainly want to be equipped to be able to jump in, and they call it the Wednesday 4 p.m. club on tour, where you're searching for a swing on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And we have that in college golf. We are not exempt, right? I remember days when that was happening to me. And, we've got that going on too. So my big thing is I want to be equipped and ready if the student comes to me and, hey, coach, what's going on? I need something. We've all been there, right? We've all been there. So, I think having the knowledge, that's why I'm an LPGA member, having the knowledge ready is probably the best thing I can do for my kids.
I agree.
I agree as well. Definitely something that you need to have. Cindy, you want to go ahead, or do you want me to?
Yeah. How many players do you have on your team?
It varies every year, obviously, with recruiting, but I've had anywhere from 6, 7. I'm going to have 9 this coming year. That's pretty normal. I kind of like 8. I like 8 on the roster. It kind of keeps it competitive at home when you go to tournaments. And at the same time, it doesn't kind of create 2 teams, where you kind of form the home team and then the travel team. So 8's a pretty good number, Cindy.
Do you, how many full rides do you get?
We are not fully funded. The NC2A max is 6 for women's golf Division I. All your Power 5 conferences have 6 scholarships. I don't. I have more in the neighborhood of 3.5. So that's on the low end, honestly, for my conference. My conference is starting to really climb up there in the Big West, and I'm lagging behind by almost 2. So to our point here, I've got my work cut out for me in developing players. I have to do more with less.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When you say fully funded, just so I understand, do you have to go raise that money?
I can.
If somebody gave you 3 more full rides or 2.5 more full rides, you would be fully funded and everything would be great, yes?
Probably. It would be better than it is now. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But that's like, lots of work.
Yeah, that's not something that I individually would try to kind of embark on. I'll fundraise, but what I'm fundraising for is like, that extra shirt we're going to buy, or, that trip we might go on, that spring break trip. Me fundraising for full-on scholarships, it's not part of my role really. That's like that's really more of a development role.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Ted, go ahead.
So, Gina, let me ask you, when it comes to attitude of players, I want to give you a scenario, and I'm curious to see how you particularly would handle this. So let's say you have two of your players. One is more proficient with their golf game. In other words, they're a very accomplished player, but their attitude stinks. Negative, very self-centered. And you have a player who maybe doesn't quite always make the grade, decent player, obviously well enough to make the team, but has an extremely positive, self-motivating. How do you handle each of those students? And do you revert back? I mean, obviously, you want to win competitions and that, so obviously one strength would be that better player, but sometimes that self-centered, and I know every team sees it, or negative attitude, if you will, at times, because they are self-centered, can be actually detrimental to your team. How do you handle those two scenarios? How do you handle those two players?
Sure, Ted. I think that this wouldn't be so much of an incidental thing as much as it is woven into my culture. I so firmly believe that the only thing we can control is our attitude. The only thing you can control are your choices about how you're going to approach a shot, your choices about course management, your choice that you can't control anything else. You can't control how you're feeling that day. You can't control what your competitors are doing. Can't control the wind, the bounces you get, whatever.
Right.
So really woven into my culture is very heavily too is the power of choosing the right attitude to espouse. And all of the changes and the good things you're going to see when you just make that switch. Certainly, the player who's, I guess Les picked a dodgeball, but gosh darn, she tries her best every time out there. I mean, that person always sort of tugs on our heartstrings as coaches. And I really don't make sacrifices in terms of, well, this player's really going to throw a number out there. I really, I leave everything up to qualifying and numbers. They go out there, they duke it out. We play 4 rounds, and then whoever's low goes to the tournament. So I'm not really making those choices per se, but you just kind of preach things every day. And if you do have a player that's negative, you really you really hope that things start to sink in if it's what your culture is about. So
let me ask you.
Do you
can
think
I
though?
Ask you a question?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Cindy.
Let me just. Do you really go by the numbers no matter what?
Yeah, in qualifying, I have them play, sometimes we don't have time for 4 rounds, but play 3 rounds before a tournament. Literally we add the numbers up in the low 5. If you earned it, you go, right? If you earned it to go into the tournament, you go. I've had experience with different coaching styles and different, certainly there are coaches who purely pick. I know several of them. For me, when I've seen that, I don't feel like it really fosters a culture, the culture I'm looking for. It sort of fosters more of a culture of pleasing the coach. I mean, that's just what I've seen. There are people who have success with it. I know Andrea Gaston, who was at USC for a number of years, now at Texas A&M, somebody I highly respect. She does a lot of picking. And it kind of depends on the person, you know. I don't want to be that person who picks anyway. You know, I don't want to have somebody in my office every single week and explaining why I picked. It's just, it seems like, you know, I can circumvent a lot of that. And I truly believe if you play your way into the lineup, you know, you should go. And it's my responsibility to get, you know, a large enough sample qualifying 2 rounds, right, where anybody can just career it and sneak in there. It's my responsibility to get an accurate, like a large enough sample to where they can fairly, you know, duke it out, so to say.
Good for you. Ted, go ahead.
Gina, let me go back to being competitive again. You played on the tour as well, and obviously you know what it's like, as you said, trying to find your swing on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. So you've had your share of up, and I like that. I'm still laughing inside about that. I think that's very, very true, but very humorous. So I'm going to sort of pick your mind from your playing career and how you implement it now in your coaching. So when you're in a playing mode, when you were in a playing mode, obviously everything didn't always go your way. Sometimes you hit fantastic rounds. Sometimes it just, you couldn't get it done. What did it say to you? And now that you're a coach, what do you draw from that experience that you now sort of, again, I know you're going by the numbers primarily, but you obviously have to bring in certain elements of your own experience into teaching, so that these young ladies that are sort of up and coming and post tournament play, shall we say, or pre-tournament play in a professional level. What do you do? How do you handle, based on what you know, things that they're going to be faced with when they're out there playing for the team, if you understand what I mean?
Yeah, can you be just a little more specific?
Sure. Cindy asks me that all the time too.
Yeah, it's okay. I think I understand. It's okay. I think I understand what you're saying. How do I use my experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically when you're, drawing from your past experience when you're playing professionally,
sure.
You knew what to expect after, maybe the first season or two, because, the first year you're kind of just trying to find your way. But after a couple of years under your belt, you say, okay, now I get it. You found a rhythm and you're getting into it and that. Do you do things with your students, with your players, to help them find their rhythm? And if so, what?
Yeah. The main thing that really stands out to me, Ted, is, I teach a lot of mental game. That was huge in my experience. And like you said, that's all we can draw on, right? I teach a lot out of Pia and Lynn's books, Vision 54 stuff. We go really heavy on mental game. What I've noticed, though, in the last couple of years that is a sort of a technicality, but that I feel like I have to teach, are the ball flight laws, quite honestly. Players on the PGA Tour don't really know the ball flight laws. They do now more that TrackMan's been out for a while, but we do kind of some contingency planning where, oh my gosh, I am snap hooking it. I don't want my girls being those players who have no idea why that's happening. I want them to be educated on the ball flight laws. They don't need to be thinking about their swing. I don't want them to be thinking about their swing on the course. But I want them to know why the ball is curving the way that it is. And most players don't know why that happens. Or they have a misinterpretation of the ball flight laws regarding the face-to-path relationship, and they can't ever figure it out because they don't have the right information. So to answer your question, I was really heavy in the mental game when I was a player. Not surprising that I really push it as a coach. But also the information that I wish I had having to do with just the simple ball flight laws. Andy Plummer did a study on the PGA Tour. This was, I think, in 2006. And he asked, a handful of PGA Tour players, quite a few, and I think there were like 75% who did not know the ball flight laws. So they thought that the initial direction of the ball was the path was responsible for the direction of the ball, the initial direction, and then the face was responsible for like the curve. So if PGA Tour players are struggling with that, I think it's fair to say a number of years later that college players are too. So, I try to get them educated on stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, because you're limited really in a lot of ways, and I think that when you understand what the ball, and Cindy talks about this a lot of times too, with the club face and direction and so forth. And I think once a player understands how the ball is going to react under different situations, pertaining to, again, ball flight laws, I think it's easier for them to adapt and make changes, not necessarily out in tournament, but with their game overall. And you're right, it's surprising how many tour players have no idea or have very limited understanding of ball flight laws. So, if at the highest level of the LPGA and PGA tours, if they're not really getting it, it's in fact, probably some of the college players probably have a better understanding than some of the tour players did. But that's interesting. Cindy, go ahead.
What do you love best about coaching?
That's hard to pick, Cindy. I think the non-golf part. I think the mentoring and seeing somebody grow, life skills. I have a player currently on my roster who has really run the gamut. She walked onto the program, struggled her first year academically, struggled to crack into the lineup. And she grew and grew and grew and evolved. And last year she almost won the conference championship. She got straight A's for a number of semesters now. Seeing somebody's growth, and I think, Cindy, that's probably big for all of us teachers is, watching somebody grow and change and get it. I think that's what I like the best.
So here's what I am hearing from you. And I never stopped to think about this until you just said this. So when you stop playing, when you play, it's all about you. You are your only inventory. It's all about, what am I eating? What am I working out? What am I practicing? What am I shooting? Where do I have to go? I. And then you have to shift states, and it's not about you anymore. It's about them. And I never thought about that until I just heard you say that. That's so profound. But how giving you are. I mean, so am I, but I never stopped and thought about it. It's like, oh, wow. So kudos to you. I mean, how did you decide not to play anymore? What happened? And how did you go from playing and everything's all about Gina, and now it's not about Gina. It's about helping others grow. When did that happen?
Sure. Yeah. About 5 years into playing, honestly, things were just getting expensive. You kind of want to settle a little bit. I've traveled incessantly for 5 years. So I wanted to have a steady income. I wanted to still be involved in golf. It's hard to make it out there, obviously. We're preaching to the choir, but I loved it. I did, but it wasn't getting everything done at age 28 or 29 that I wanted to get done. So I guess it was a shift, Cindy. Although I've always enjoyed helping others and teaching. My dad's a teacher. So I think it's sort of, interwoven in who I am anyway. But yeah, watching someone's growth is, one of the most rewarding things. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Good job. Ted, go ahead.
Very good. So let's, in our final moments, let's go back a little bit to the beginning and why golf for you. We know that golf, unlike many of the other sports, isn't something that we get introduced to in the school system early on. In most cases, until we get to either high school or obviously collegiate. So it's not something like many of our other sports that we play at recess or what have you. So how did you get into golf? How did you get introduced to golf first and foremost? And when was the moment that you decided this is something I want to be more involved with? I want to play. I want to be competitive, and so on and so forth. And obviously we know where you are now and why you made that switch. How did you get started?
Sure. My parents played. I played all sports, though. I was just a tomboy. And I think what ended up happening is, I played soccer. I'd get injured a lot. I was smaller, but I was quick. But you just get injured. I think golf really just fit my personality. Quite honestly, I'm an introvert. That tends to surprise people, but I'm very much an introvert. I'm very cerebral. I just kind of connect with what the sport is. And, I kind of whittled down the sports that I was playing eventually in high school. You can't really do everything at a high level if you want to pursue a college scholarship. So I kind of whittled down what I was interested in, and, golf was that thing. I was really fortunate to have parents who who sacrificed a lot for me to be able to do it. It's playing the AJGA, and you're basically playing on tour before you go on tour. And, it's
right.
You're traveling everywhere. I was flying everywhere at age 15. What a tremendous opportunity I had. And, without that, I just wouldn't have been able to go to college and play at such a high level. So, it's you do a lot of growing up at a young age, and my parents' support really is what did it for me. I was born in Redlands. I grew up in Redlands. My parents are still in the area, so a lot of access. Right, I didn't have to play golf 6 months out of the year. I know, Cindy, you're from New York. I was lucky to have golf all year round. So, just kind of loved it from the beginning, just the nature of the sport and, the fact that it's a game for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask one final question, and that is, when you look back on all aspects of your exposure to golf, I'm a firm believer that golf and life in general parallel each other in many ways. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned, not only on the lesson tee, but in life. If you could think of one particular, is there a particular life lesson that you take away from your golf experience thus far? Is there one thing that you can think of that you've learned about life in general while playing?
Sure. Yeah. I would say there are two things. One is grit. Grit meaning passion and perseverance and how much that matters versus talent. There's a fascination with talent, this innate ability to play golf or, someone was touched by the hand of God and they're just this amazing player, born that way kind of thing. And I've learned and researched a lot and watched players who have that innate ability. I've watched players who are gritty. And Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit. It came out, I think, 2 to 3 years ago. And it really shows you and hammers home the point of how much perseverance weighs in against talent, against the talented player who gives up easily or, just doesn't continue for whatever reason. So I think to answer that question, Ted, I've learned so much about grit and how much perseverance matters. The second thing is how whatever is inside of you is going to manifest outside of you. Okay, so I guess we could call that attitude or outlook. But whatever, thoughts and feelings and, whatever's going on in the internal world is going to come out in the external world, right? You can't be fuming inside and then expect, these beautiful, graceful outcomes. It's just, I think, taking ownership of your kind of internal world and your attitude. So those are the two big ones for me.
Very interesting. That's great. I love that. Cindy, any final thoughts or questions that you have for Gina, and then we'll wrap up?
No, I'm just so grateful you were here today. What a gem you are.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Those girls should be very grateful to have you as a coach.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Gina, for your time this morning, and we look forward to, even though we've all had a late start this season, we look forward to hopefully a much better ending. And what's the current status, just very quickly, and then we have to go. What's the current status right now with things in California as far as with this current pandemic? What's the schedule? I know there's been talk of in some cases potentially a much later start or not starting the season at all as far as school. What's the current status? Do you know?
It's all over the map, Ted. It is literally all over the place. Different counties are different. I know UCLA was asked to redo their fall with driving only to tournaments, that is. We have no idea, Ted. The only consensus we come to is if football plays, well, we need football to play. We need football to play. Even schools that don't have football, we need the NCAA funding. We need March Madness to happen. You'll see a lot of universities closing their doors if it doesn't happen. They're so reliant on the revenue from football. I think $7 million is lost for every Pac-12 game that's not played. So,
wow.
The health and safety is number one. Absolutely.
Sure.
No doubt. But, we need football to go in order for us to really be guaranteed to have a sport. So. Well,
we will keep everyone in our thoughts and prayers as we all navigate this, and we know that it's a lot of times it's not always in our hands. It's in a greater power than ours. So we'll have to hopefully imagine that things will come through. But Gina, I agree with Cindy. Thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. It's been a pleasure, and you're certainly welcome to come back any time. And good luck this season. Hopefully everything will work out, and good luck with the team.
Thanks so much, Ted. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Good luck.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. That was our special guest, Gina Umeck, head women's golf coach at California State University in Northridge in Los Angeles. Definitely a very interesting perspective to the game. And as we talked about earlier in our first segment, she definitely draws from her experience on the Symetra Tour. So much like you, who played much and still plays on the Legends Tour, competitive golf, draws from that experience so she can help her students. So definitely a plus to have. And we want to thank you this morning. We hope we've given you a little bit of clarification on the difference between a golf teacher professional and a golf coach, and some of the similarities as well. And we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to having you join us next week on the Women of Golf. God bless everybody, and have a great holiday weekend. Happy 4th of July for everybody. We won't see you until next week. So thank you. Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening this morning to the Women of Golf Show. Tune in live each week by visiting blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf, or on any of these social media platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, TalkStream Live, and of course Spotify. If you can't join us live, check out our on-demand section for previously aired broadcasts. To get updates for future shows and upcoming guests, you can follow us on Facebook at Women of Golf. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO, and Cindy at Cindy Miller Golf. Please remember to join us next week on the Women of Golf Show. See you next time. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.